Hello everybody, welcome to the Politics of Declamation Part 2, our chapter 1.5, From Forum to Boardroom. This is lecturer B.A. Marquez. Welcome and have a great afternoon. Let's begin with an excerpt from Controversia of Seneca the Elder, the man who disinherited his nephew. Children must support their parents or be imprisoned. Two brothers were at loggerheads. One had a son. The uncle fell into need. Though his father told him not to, the judge supported him. As a result, he was disinherited without protest. He was adopted by his uncle. The uncle received a bequest and became rich. The father has fallen into need, and the youth is supporting him against his uncle's wishes. Now he is being disinherited again. For the son, Porcius Latro, what is your reproach against me? Extravagance, I suppose. All my excessive expenditure has been lavished on supporting two old men. When my father told me to, he said, he wouldn't support me if I were in need. Now he was in such a plight that his last hope of support lay in the house, where there lived a son he disinherited and a brother who hated him. Suppose again, but why do I look for instances so far afield, as if there was a shortage at home? Anyone who has seen him realizes that the fortunate should always fear, the unfortunate never despair. So let's begin with our declamation happenings. The idea here is to remember, take some ideas, some notes, some concepts from our previous session, the previous chapter, and try to develop short declamatory exercises. So, the idea is as follows. Is speaking one or two of these themes, for example, F. Tyrants and tyrannicide is killing the despot a civic duty, or J. Tyranny versus civic life. Despotism is incompatible with a law-governed city. Pick one, two, or even three themes of the ones you can see portrayed on your screen. Then, in part 2, brain spark some questions. For every code, every theme you pick, jot some answers. Who is speaking? A citizen, a senator, a son, a daughter, a slave, a teacher, an apprentice? What's at stake? Maybe life, property, reputation, a city, disinheritance, life or death of a tyrant, war, desired verdict or action. What would it be? Honor, exile, disinheritance, pardon, revolt, price, death, suicide, rape, you name it. Remember, we can be as vague as we want with our declamations. And flash a phrase from the chart that must appear verbatim. Like, for example, honors for the slayer of a tyrant. Number 3, Craft your mini declamation, 5-10 minutes. Use a Roman 4-step skeleton, the most easy one. Exordium, focus into the vivid line. The narratio, state the essential facts of the declamation, important things like ones mentioned when we started the session. Argumenta, one short claim, one supporting example. Peroratio, close with a moral punch or civic warning. The length, 100-150 words. 90 seconds spoken aloud. Try to record yourself at audio, at a video, with a teleprompter, and just go for it. Let's motivate ourselves a little bit. Let's ground ourselves with our 2 feet on the ground. Some roots develop deep into the ground of Rome, of Italy. Be comfortable behind your eyes, the center of your head. Turn down your analyzers, your overthinkers, your internal music, your internal speech. And let's face yourself. Set out at dawn beneath the old arch of Porta San Pancrazio. Feet steady on the cobbles that climb that Janiculum spine. With every step, let the past rise beside you. The tramp of legionaries, the murmur of poets, the hush of pilgrims or orators. Keep climbing until the road levels at the Fontanone, which at the left, where the last breath of an ancient aqueduct still spills in milky torrents into marble basins. Pause a bit, fill your lungs with a cool spray, drink a little bit of the water, and feel the scent of the cypress. Turn. Before you stretches the whole red-tiled, sun-struck miracle of Rome's Sophistopolis, domes glittering like shields, the Tiber curling in silver, history stacked upon history as far as eye dares wander, centuries after centuries. Let this panorama be your podium. You are at the Fontanone view at Rome. Lift your voice with and declaim. Speak the dream you carry, the justice you seek, the gratitude you feel for simply standing here, alive among centuries. On this hilltop, your words join a chorus, 2,000 years strong, and the whole forum and the city listens. Reflect on that when you start redacting your mini declamation. Like the image on your screen. You are ready to declaim the forum, the Sophistopolis, to the city, the murmurs of the Tiber, and the sunset of the hills. Okay, said this, let's continue our part 2. Finally, there are cases in which the connection to political realities is even stronger. Ida Gilda Mastrosa has emphasized an episode reported by Seneca the Elder, related to a controversy about harm to the Republic. This sort of ideas, themes, are the ones we're using for our next meditation happenings. So if you want to take notes, it would be great. Harm to the Republic, against a matron who refused a womanly duty of producing children. Mastro Rosa has shown that the episode, normally dated to the late Augustan period, should instead be attributed to the period when the Lex Julia de Maritandis Ordinibus was promulgated, around 18 BCE, to encourage the civic duty, another topic theme of productive marriage, with ramified awards and incentives. This law appears to have been echoed almost immediately in the schools of rhetoric and oratory, and inspired the elaboration of themes, problematizing its content and bringing under a critical lens this Augustan doctrine, all under the cover of harmless declamatory exercise. If Antonius Tramalia, who reads an allusion to the legend of the birth of the future Augustus by the god Apollo in the thief of Seneca's Rosoria, is right, we would have a case in which the rhetoricians recuperate in real time a central aspect of the ideology of the Principate. Now up to this point, I have spoken only about controversia, but a survey of the possible political meanings of declamation must also consider the other product of the rhetorical schools, the Suasoria. Fortunately, this is a body of text that has reached us in very reduced form. Only 7 complete texts that Seneca the Elder appended to the 10 books of his Controversia. Recently, references to the Augustan age, identifiable in the background of the preserved themes, have been meticulously uncovered by Elvira Miliario. Here it will be sufficient to refer to the 2 Suasoria, the 6th and 7th, related to the figure of Cicero, and in particular to his murder by a triumvirate of which Augustus was a member. Suasoria 6. Cicero deliberates whether to ask for mercy from Antony. Suasoria 7. Cicero deliberates whether to throw his own writings into the fire, following a promise of immunity from Antony if he should do so. The reading of these texts and of Seneca Controversia 7.2 on the same theme shows, among other things, that the declaimers were collectively aligned with the regime's version of history, which impute to Antony alone the guilt of that terrible murder. With very rare exceptions, the personal responsibility of Octavian, who chose to sacrifice his political mentor on the altar of an alliance with 2 Caesarians. Remains largely in the shadows. Difficult to say whether because of explicit pressure by those in power or owning to spontaneously self-censoring by teachers themselves, or even by Seneca, who selectively preserves their positions. As for the controversy on Popilius, the theme of which was given in back chapters, its theme also fastidiously insists on the guilt of Antony as the sole instigator of Cicero's murder, but also possesses a question of great political significance: to what extent it is possible to make a legal case out of the civil war. Another concept, civil war, and who chose to sacrifice his political mentor. You can take some notes on that. Putting on trial the actual perpetrators of crimes committed in the feverish climate of the triumvirate, and that purport to be justified by the climate. But sometimes Sosoria go further. In the second book of Seneca, On Benefits, the author affirms that it is customarily discussed whether Brutus acted appropriately when he took the life of Caesar, who surely had spared his. The expression makes us think that Seneca, who was so entrenched in the environment of the rhetorical schools, thanks to his father's teachings, is alluding to Sosoria theme, in which the future assassin of Caesar deliberated over the step he was about to take. Another topic. We can infer that, in the school context, the episode of Caesaricide was transformed into an exercise around the declamatory category of ingratitude, somewhat as in the aforementioned Controversia of Seneca the Elder. The murder of Cicero was seen as the outcome of Popilius' vicious nature, willing to kill the patron who had once successfully defended him on a capital charge. Indeed, Popilius was imagined to be brought to court de moribus, and not for the assassination as such. This might seem to be a prudent, if not actually obscurantist strategy, a way to defang these episodes by omitting their more politically embarrassing aspects and bringing them back within the boundaries of relations and of exquisitely private and personal faults. But that would be mistaken. The sources on Caesaricide show that the figure of Brutus was highly controversial, also because of having benefited from Caesar and thus of having been bound to him by in a relationship of gratitude, which the act of homicide fractured. Whatever the chosen perspective, the Sosoria which in benefits draws seems to have thematized moral judgments of Caesar's murder, a meaningful choice. When we consider that the young Claudius, not yet emperor, abandoned the idea of composing an historical work covering of the Ides of March, persuaded that it was not possible to speak freely of it, that in the era of Nero was still possible to be condemned for keeping an effigy of Cassius at home, and that even under the Optimus Princeps Trajan it was dangerous to demonstrate admiration for Brutus publicly. So the declaimers, unlike Silius Italicus in Epic, did not hide behind Rome's remote past, material that was less appealing but less dangerous, and sometimes took the risk of touching on the most charted episodes of the recent history, like the Caesaricide. We should not underestimate this courageous choice, which may have attracted to the schools the less than benevolent attention of suspicious emperors. The fact is that the bloody period between the Ides of March, 44 BCE, and the beginning of the triumvirate's proscriptions around the end of 43 BCE remained for the entire Julio-Claudian era, and to some degree, even after a sort of past that does not pass, to which historiography and literature constantly return, recognizing it in the roots of the present and the cradle of the imperial regime. Don't surprise then that in the period of Seneca, the figure of Brutus and his political act were a recurring subject of debate in the schools. So Brutus and his political act. We can assume that this debate was conducted cautiously, as in the case of Cicero's assassination, because emperors were sensitive to how that crucial historical event was reconstructed and interpreted. Cremutius Cordus was brought to trial under Tiberius in 25 CE for having praised Brutus and called Cassius Caesar's killer, the last of the Romans. Quintilian informs us that when Cordus' work returned to circulation under Caligula, it was expurgated of the parts that have harmed their author, and therefore, presumably, of the admiring judgment of Cassius that was the cause of its censoring. Finally, the question of the politics of declamation can be addressed from another, perhaps more substantive point of view. In research of the last 30 years, scholars have often insisted on the presumed conservative character of school rhetoric. Declamations are thought to offer a rigorous education in the traditional values of the elite, teaching its young members exactly what their fathers would want them to hear. In short, they have been seen as a powerful means of socializing. New generations to the dominant values of the society. The controversia are thought to deliver the core values of Romanesque, confirm distinctions of status and of gender, reinforce traditional roles, especially that of the father, teach what it means to exist and to think as a Roman, and educate elite males to the governing role they will one day be called upon to exercise over their subordinates, whether these are children, wives, slaves, fellow citizens, or subjects. According to this broad vision, declamations are not so political in the sense of endorsing a specific type of government, or worse, recommending a republican alternative to the imperial regime, but by virtue of imagining the present as a direct descendant of the Roman values. Another very important topic, the present as a direct descendant of the Roman values and roles of the past, to the preservation and transmission of which the rhetorical school definitively contribute. This way of viewing declamatory rhetoric has become so entrenched in scholarship that it is often taken for granted and has the force of an idea requiem. We need to ask, however, if this view accurately captures the state of affairs that emerges from a comprehensive reading of declamation, as attested in surviving collections. To our lights, this view is only partially correct. Declamation does not actually question social hierarchies and establish gender roles. In the school themes, children are subordinate to fathers and must obey. Wives must be faithful to their husbands and must obey. Women and minors have no right to speak in court, and their interests must be represented at trial by a patron. Freedmen and slaves are divided by an unsurmountable chasm, and so on. Sophistopolis is an imaginary place, but what Umberto Eco once said about possible worlds holds for it too, unless explicitly stated otherwise. Their functioning must be considered in line with that of the real world. But this is only part of the truth, because the controversia are above all an ongoing reflection on power and its limits. Established hierarchies are constantly open to challenges and oppositions, to which declamation gives space and a voice, persuasively articulating their reasons and giving them an equal platform. It is true that fathers maintain the position of primacy that Roman culture always recognized for them. In this sense, to claim that declamation works to confirm patria potestas, another concept, and contest only its excesses or abuses is obvious. Still, it is also true that fathers almost always make an appearance in declamation, because the possibility is recognized for their children to bring them to court for dementia, to contest before a judge, an abdicatio considered unjust. So dementia, abdicatio considered unjust, to claim some unjust or unappropriate exercise of power, having one's case heard and one's reasons possibly accepted by the virtual court where controversia are debated. Certainly, the school themes are structurally open, in the sense that the debates they stage never reach a conclusion that gives victory to one or the other party. There are many declamations that mention in the theme cases of fathers who have tried many times to disinherit a child, but had the judges reject their applications in each case. Thus, the possibility that a weaker party could defeat the stronger party in court was fully contemplated. Indeed, the very existence of a tribunal tasked with judging the legitimacy of disinheritance presupposes this possibility. Charges of dementia plays a similar role. This is the only charge that in declamatory jurisprudence a child can bring against a father, as the theme of Minor 346 explains, and as the following cases that you now see on your screen exemplify. A tyrant allows slaves to kill their masters and rape their mistresses. The city's nobles flee to foreign territory, and among these is one who has a son and a daughter, while all the older slaves rape their mistresses. This manslave respected the girl's virginity. When the tyrant is killed, the nobles return and crucify their slaves. This man instead frees his slave and gives him his daughter in marriage. The man is accused by his son of madness or dementia. Let the rapist, unless he is granted pardon within 30 days both by his father and by that of the woman he has assaulted, be condemned to death. A man commits rape. He is pardoned by that woman's father, but not by his own. He accuses his father of madness. So the concept of madness. The father of a luxurious fought heroically. He does not choose a prize as allowed to him by law. He is accused by his son of madness. A man who had one frugal one luxurious son disinherits the latter because he fell in love with a courtesan. The disinherited son moves in with a courtesan. When he falls ill, he summons his father and entrusts to him the child he has had by the courtesan, begging him to accept the child within the family. He dies. The old man wishes to accept the child into the family. The other son accuses him of madness. As you can see, the controversy on madness had recently been studied with the perspective of ancient medicine and of jurisprudence on mental illnesses, showing that declamation was again high receptive to contemporary debates of science and learning and illnesses, which were promptly echoed in the arguments of the rhetoricians. Beside precise references to this or that pathology or etiology of psychological dysfunction, what counts is that paternal behaviors can be challenged when they appear to be irrational or out of sync with the functions and duties of a real father, normal father, As appears from the examples given here, accusation of madness is a very thin veil, almost explicitly a pretext for the real problem, which is how to define the correct behavior of a parent. The fact that it can be a child who questions that behavior, even if the child must first ask a tribunal to recognize the merits of its claims, is an extremely important datum. In rhetorical schools, students learn to speak for fathers as well as against them. Analogously, husbands certainly enjoy a position of preeminence within the conjugal pair, but a wife hardly lacks juridical mechanisms for asserting her rights. On divorce, she has at her disposal the generic charge of ingratitude. Gratitude, another concept. In cases where the matrimonial selection has been conceived as a benefit to the husband, and the more specific charges of unjustified divorce, and above all of mala tractatio. As in the case of the charge of madness against fathers, mistreatment is also often a convenient vehicle for bringing to the attention of judges a very wide range of marital behaviors. It is interesting that this charge is often invoked when actions relating to children are at stake. For example, in the last two mayores, where a father kills his son suspected of an incestuous relations with a mother. Legal action is allowed for mistreatment, suspecting him of having committed incest with his mother. A father tortures his son in a remote part of the house and kills him in the midst of these torments. The mother asks him what he learned from the son, and on his refusal she accuses him of mistreatment. The underlying idea, but often made explicit, for instance, in Pseudo-Quintilian's Green-Maid Major on the ill twins, is that children and mother represent a cohesive unit, almost to the point that any behavior by the father that is harmful to the integrity or well-being of the children is considered ipso facto mistreatment of the mother concept. Who can then bring this behavior to account in court? We can see this in a theme cited for didactic purposes in manuals in the case of Fortunatius Ars Rhetorica. He killed 3 children on the basis of the law that allows a father to put his children to death without trial. His wife accuses him of mistreatment. Rather than highlighting the limits of the mother's agency, she is allowed to intervene in the male arena public speech and the court only for protecting her children, but not, for example, for controlling their conduct. To conclude that, school rhetoric once again confirms and reinforces gender differences. It is worth noting by this oblique and indirect route, which figures the abuses of the husband against his children as an act of disrespect against the mother. The mother can, in fact, challenge the exercise of patria potestas, the most untouchable of paternal prerogatives, openly in court, thus contributing to the contestation of power, its extension and its limits that we have been speaking about. The numerous controversies about sexual violence offer a final example. One of the themes of Seneca the Elder Controversia 1.5 has been translated in the chapters before us. In this case, scholastic laws attribute to the woman who has suffered raptus a power she could never have exercised in real life, that of choosing to spare the life of her violator or not. a decision that must in any case be expressed before the court. Even in such situations, declamation subjects the woman's prerogatives to the guarantee of a third party. In her research, Graciana Brescia has shown that this power is often undermined by a father's attempt to influence a daughter's decision and to guide her in a direction conforming to his own interests rather than her wishes. But this does not detract from the fact that once again, a weak link in the social system, a woman, a daughter, a victim of violence, of raptus, of rape, is recognizing as having certain rights that in this case elevate her above the opposing party and to the nuclear family, to which she is normally and by law subordinate. Further examples could be given, but the point here is clear. Far from being a mere recapitulation of traditional culture and its models, declamation is a potent vehicle for questioning that culture. It does not teach to be and think like a Roman, as many have claimed. In the rhetorical schools, one learned instead to negotiate a set of rules and interdictions inherited from the past, bringing different and opposing rights into interaction, staging new interpretive possibilities of conventional solutions, putting traditional models to the test in extreme situations that help confirm them or recommend their reconsideration. The fact that these models are represented in the declamation in the form of laws that either attribute some right, for example, to kill a child without trial or impose some responsibility, to, for example, to support one parent in need, does not have the effect of armoring them from discussion. In fact, those laws become the subject of an unending interpretive negotiation and are juxtaposed to other different and other, often contradictory laws. This requires identification of priorities, the introduction of derogations and interventions, where judicial law making does not provide regulation. Declamation is by its nature a celebration of relativism. Nobody intervenes authoritatively to decide wrong and right. No conventionally accepted system of mores is so untouchable that it escapes the process of continual redefinition of roles and prerogatives. There are no free zones, no forbidden areas of debate, as we have mentioned. So, to open your mind to all kind of debate. No power secure in a position of primacy. If there are no winners and no losers at the end of a controversy, this is because there were none at the beginning. Declamation does not promote social revolution or the radical redistribution of authority, any more than Plautin comedy aims for a society marked by the dominance of clever slaves or the humiliation of avaricious fathers. To discourage such interpretations, there is, if nothing else, the fact that the educational system, of which declamation is the spear point, was only open to men, and to a socially homogeneous class. This acted as a firm guarantee of the existing order of things. Moreover, the world constructed by declamation is a deliberatively and explicitly fictional Sophistopolis universe, a cosmos made of words that lived and flourished only within the walls of the classroom, the forum, the boardroom, ceasing to exist beyond those walls. Even with this clarification, however, the rhetorical schools taught that being a thinking like a Roman is not monolithic, some univocal and predefined code that the student was simply imbibed. In short, that Roman cultural identity is not a thing but a process that you can learn bit by bit and through trial and mistake, multifaceted and multi-layered, kaleidoscopic and open to manipulation. Not everything is possible in declamation. There are situations and relationships that declamation never explores, conflicts that none of the surviving texts thematize, probably because they clash with cultural principles that were considered non-negotiable. But you can talk and you can craft your declamations for all the possible topics that you want. But beyond this restricted perimeter of impossibility, the freedom of creativity and discussion that the declaimers permitted to themselves and imparted to their students. So creativity and discussion is total, and the extent of this freedom and of the mental openness that is proposed and promoted cannot be underestimated. We simply cannot reduce the scholastic curriculum to an education in conformity and to passive recapitulation of existing thought. In this sense, declamation represents perhaps the most political cultural product of all Latin literature. Okay, said that, we finish our chapter from the Politics of Declamation. We will be reviewing the concepts reviewed here in the next session in our declamation happenings. Let's motivate us a bit in order to follow through the declamation. A tyrant who unleashes slaves, a son who drags his own father before the courts, a family torn apart by charges of madness, incest, or forbidden love, shows that declamation was never a harmless school game. It was politics played in miniature, in mini declamations. By arguing these invented cases, Roman students rehearse how law, power, public opinion, polite when society is under strain. When you step into these speeches, you inherit the training ground to test how far a ruler, a tyrant, an emperor, a republican may bend justice, how easily a private grievance becomes a civic crisis, how rhetoric can brand someone mad or heroic. Remember the madness. Studying the politics of declamation, then, is not just about memorizing ancient scandals. It's about awakening your ability to read the power dynamics hidden in every modern headline and nowadays, and to speak about them with the same fearless clarity the Romans demanded of their novices. Let these dramatic fragments be your catalyst. See the courtroom, the boardroom, in the classroom, in your room. Feel the city fate in a single family quarrel, and discover how powerful a well-forged argument can be when politics is on the line. Okay. So, thank you for listening, hearing. Try to craft your mini declamation as we portrayed at the beginning of the lesson, the session. We will be doing that also in the next session, reviewing the concepts read here, like madness, mistreatment of the mother, the patria potestas, abdicatio, dementia, the Brutus and his political act, etc. So, said this, thank you for listening, hearing. try to craft on your activities. Any idea, concept that you would like to discuss, I will be happy to assist. Just send me a message through the comment section in the LinkedIn article which this will be posted. Thank you. This was lecturer P.A. Marquez. Have a wonderful day and rest of our week. Goodbye.